Alright, what's up everybody? I'm Kevin from the Otabros show, making this video for my local library. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we're unable to do our monthly anime club where we would all meet up and watch some anime, talk about it, that kind of stuff. So instead, I was requested to make some videos about different anime series. So let's just get right into it. The first series that I want to talk about is one of my more recent favorites. It's called ReZero Kara Hajimeru Isekai Seiketsu. And that pronunciation is probably terrible, but its English name is ReZero Starting Life in Another World. From the title alone, you can probably guess that it's a fantasy isekai anime. And for those of you who may not be as familiar, an anime that is in the isekai genre is basically a story where a character from one world, typically our own, is sent to another world entirely. It's typically a fantasy world, but that's not really a rule that's set in stone or anything. It could be a science fiction, sci-fi world, any of that, but it's usually someone sent from one world to a completely different world that isn't their own. Other examples of isekai anime include shows like Konosuba, Rising of the Shield Hero, Inuyasha. The Devil is a Part-Timer is sort of a reverse on the genre, where instead of someone from, a regular person from our world getting sent to a fantasy world, it's someone from a fantasy world getting sent to our world. Kobayashi's Dragon Maid is another example of that kind of reverse on the genre. Even some Western stories, some Hollywood movies or whatever can be put into the isekai genre. Like The Wizard of Oz is probably like the OG isekai. Alice in Wonderland, The Chronicles of Narnia is another one. Just name a couple. The isekai genre is one of my personal favorites in any form of media, whether it's movies, anime, books, any of that kind of stuff. And that obviously holds true with anime. However, some of you more seasoned anime watchers most likely know that the isekai genre is pretty oversaturated. There's quite a lot of isekai anime and manga and light novels out there. As an effect of that, there's a lot of, in my opinion, subpar shows that are out there in the isekai genre for anime and manga and that kind of stuff. As much as I really enjoy the genre, there's typically I would say maybe like 80% of the isekai shows I've watched or manga that I've read, I tend to not enjoy, just because it's kind of always like the same thing done over and over and over again. But I don't want to get too into that. The shows on the isekai genre that I do end up liking end up being some of my favorite shows of all time. But speaking on that, there's probably two shows that I feel stand at like the top as far as like the content and the quality of those shows. And both of those shows are vastly different from each other. The first show is Konosuba, which some of you may have heard of or seen, which when Konosuba came out, it came out at the same time as the show that we're going to talk about today, which is ReZero. But both of those shows came out at a time where the isekai genre in anime and light novels and manga was at its, I don't want to say most popular, but there were a lot of shows and manga being created in that genre. And so because of that, there was quite an oversaturation of the shows. A lot of people were pretty sick of it by the time these two shows had come out. And where Konosuba presented itself as a kind of comedic parody on the genre as a whole to hilarious effect. It's a very good show. If you're a fan of the isekai genre, I recommend that one too. But the second show, the one that we're going to talk about is ReZero. I feel that ReZero is an example of what the isekai genre should kind of strive for in terms of storytelling, characters, the quality of animation. It kind of takes... It follows the staple formula of the isekai kind of show, almost to the letter. but it does each step very well, and it really puts the time and patience and passion into each of the parts that make up a typical isekai show, and adds a little more pizzazz to it, and in the long run that kind of makes the whole show much more enjoyable, in my opinion. So let's get some of these stats out of the way for ReZero. It began, a little bit of history on it. It began as a web novel, which essentially is just someone posting like almost chapter by chapter releases to like a forum, or in Japan they have websites that specifically cater to like web novels, or novels written on the web that anyone can post, and it kind of collects them, sort of like a YouTube, but for written works. But that got that web novel written by Tape Nagatsuki got a lot of popularity. A lot of people were taking notice of it, and it eventually got published as a full-on light novel. And now Nagatsuki did a lot of reworking to it in its transition from web novel to light novel. A lot of things got changed, a lot of things got cleared up, and just by the end of the day, it became a much more kind of structured story as a whole. And the light novel itself was illustrated by Shinichiro Otsuka. Later on in 2016, the light novel itself, so not the web novel, the light novel got adapted into an anime, and the second season of which is currently airing as I'm recording this video. There's like, I think maybe around seven episodes out of the second season, but we'll kind of get to that later. White Fox is doing both seasons. So White Fox is the animation studio behind the anime adaptation, and they've done things like Steins Gate, Akame ga Kill, Goblin Slayer, Girls Last Tour, and typically it's not a good idea to just assume that a show is good or bad based solely on the animation studio that's doing it. There's a lot of hands in the pot. There's a lot of people working on it that could change the quality of a show. But when a studio is consistently one thing, it's usually safe to assume that they're going to continue to be consistent, but that's not always a guarantee. But White Fox is, in my opinion, a pretty consistent, good quality animation studio, where at the very least, the animation quality of the show that they're putting out will be pretty on point. Next up, so it's directed by Masaharu Watanabe, who also directed Granbelm and Wakaba Girl, and that's really it. They've done a lot of like episode direction on a bunch of different shows, but as far as they're the full director, they're the head honcho of the show. It's really only been two, and of course ReZero, and they are also directing the second season, which again is airing currently. And so I just I'm gonna try and do this with as little spoilers as possible. So I might not, those of you who have watched the show, I might not touch on some things that maybe you feel like I should, but for those who haven't seen the show, I want to try to leave as little spoilers as possible. Alright, so ReZero's plot, it revolves around Natsuki Subaru, who's our main character. He's a hikikomori, or a shut-in, doesn't go to school, doesn't really leave the house, just stays. He's a high school kid, just stays in his house the whole time. Suddenly, he finds himself transported to another world full of fantasy and magic, which this is basically, for those who don't know, this is Isekai 101. Every Isekai story has a character, it's typically a high school kid, typically your average Joe, and who is also typically a shut-in, suddenly gets transported to this other world where they go on this grand adventure. So Subaru finds himself transported to this fantasy world, and while he's here, he meets a silver-haired half-elf who introduces herself as Satella. She kind of helps him out. Subaru is in some trouble. As soon as he gets there, she saves him. And to repay her, he helps Satella try to find her missing emblem, which has been stolen from her. So they both work together to find it. They spend all day looking for it, kind of, get to know one another, develop like a friendship. But when the two of them, by the end of the day, are mysteriously killed, this is all episode 1 stuff, so don't worry about spoilers here. At the end of the day, the two of them are mysteriously killed. Subaru finds himself kind of waking up shocked, almost as if like he'd awoken from like a terrible dream. But he's standing right in front of the apple salesman which is where he got transported to the world in the first place. So they get mysteriously killed, and he wakes up. And he's right back kind of where he started in front of the apple cart, and he's not really sure what the deal is. Well, it turns out the deal is that Subaru has an ability that is called, or that he kind of refers to as return by death, which essentially is the equivalent to a save point or like a checkpoint in, let's say, like a video game. So he dies and he kind of respawns at this checkpoint. He's gone back in time. He's literally gone back in time to wherever this checkpoint or respawn point is. So, no one remembers any of the things that happened, that Subaru just experienced, because everything's gone back in time. Subaru, of course, remembers, but none of the other characters do. So he's sent back to his checkpoint, and he reintroduces himself to Satella, who, again, because of the time travel, doesn't know who he is and is deeply offended when he calls her by the name Satella. Because, as it turns out, her real name is actually Amelia, and Satella is the name of an ancient evil witch in this world who many people deeply fear, whom Amelia bears a striking resemblance to. So, because of that, she takes a lot of heat for looking like this witch and for being a demi-human, which we'll get into later, being a half-elf. So she's pretty ticked off. Subaru uses his return by death and eventually manages to save himself and Amelia from being killed. And this is kind of this first, we'll call it death loop, or we'll call it a loop. This first loop is a good example of what the show's going to be. Because what happens is bad stuff happens to Subaru all the time and the people around him, and he ends up very often getting killed. So he goes back to this checkpoint, which he has no control over where these checkpoints get made. He has no control over activating this power whatsoever. The power is essentially he gets killed and he gets sent back to a checkpoint. Sometimes the checkpoint moves, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time he'll be stuck in a loop for a while until he manages to get past the part where he dies and continue on, and usually a new checkpoint is made then. So as the show progresses, more and more of these kind of death loops pop up, and Subaru has to use his return by death power to try and make things that are that have gone horribly wrong. He tries to make them right so that he can see the next day. I guess here's probably like a good point to give a fair warning, that the show is not incredibly gory, but at the same time the show doesn't really hold anything back. Subaru and many of the other characters are killed, and because of the time travel thing, this happens a lot. Limbs are lost, blood is shown. So again, like, warning if that's something you're not necessarily into. I don't think it's anything grotesque. It's not over the top, but at the same time, it's not strawberry jam that's coming out. Like, he got stabbed with a sword that's blood, and they make it apparent. So the plot of ReZero in its kind of base form, like I said earlier, is very similar to a lot of other isekai out there, and that's a trend that is going to continue throughout all aspects of the show. ReZero is a show that's very similar in almost all of its aspects to every other isekai show that is out there. The difference and what sets ReZero apart from those other shows, and why I think it's one of the best examples of how good an isekai story can be, is that ReZero's got a lot more like substance to the things that it's doing. There's a lot of things at work underneath what you may initially see when you first sit down and watch this show. A lot of other isekai anime, like Rising of the Shield Hero is one a lot of people like, that I enjoyed as well. A Wise Man's Grandchild is another isekai show that a lot of people find very entertaining. But those shows are kind of like fun, easy to watch shows. that, you know, you can be they can be enjoyed without having to really pay like too much attention about what's going on or think too hard about what's going on. You can sit on the couch with your friends and make jokes, and, you know, you know, you can multitask while watching these shows and not really miss anything and still have a good time. You know, those shows are fun, and I'm not knocking those shows. Those shows are great and definitely entertaining. My point, you know, my point is, the reason why I bring that up is that if you go into ReZero with that same kind of mindset, where you don't really have to pay attention to it, it's a fun like fantasy romp around in this world, you're gonna be drastically missing out on what makes ReZero so special. It's a heavy show. It's not necessarily complicated, but it's the show is methodically planned out. Everything that happens really matters. Even, like, you know, small things characters say are things you need to pay attention to and kind of read into a little bit to know what they're really saying or hinting at. And, you know, those kind of aspects I feel are necessary, especially when you're writing a show that is dealing so much with time travel. It's very easy for, you know, time travel stories to become incredibly convoluted or overcomplicated and confusing, or even worse, become contradictory of things that they had established earlier on, which ReZero doesn't do, at least in my, you know, in my experience with it. So, you know, if you're going to give the show a shot, make sure you're really watching it. You know, set some time aside to watch a couple episodes and really watch them. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised if you do. And as much as I love the plot, and as much as I think like the story and the writing is very good, where I think ReZero shines the most is in its characters. And I don't. There's a huge cast of characters in this show, and all of them have roles to play and are very important. And we've talked a lot about it on my other show, but I don't want this video to be incredibly long, so I'm going to try and get through at least some of the major players. So I think where the show really shines is in the characters. The characters are truly well written, fleshed out, like they're fully realized human beings that clearly have their own distinct personalities. That's something important, because, like I talked about earlier, these death loops that continue to happen until Subaru figures out a way to you know, get past them. You're rewatching the same plot events unfold over and over and over and over and over and over again. The characters may be doing different things. There may be some subtle changes to it, but as far as like the bullet points of what is happening in the actual plot of the story, they're the same. It's the same thing happening over and over again. And you can only be entertained, at least I feel, that you can really only be entertained watching the same thing play out over and over again, is because the characters in the show themselves are so interesting. And in all these different loops, like the same plot events might be playing out, but you're seeing all these different sides of these characters. You know, you get to see how they act, if they view Subaru as a friend, as an enemy, as someone who's not worth their time, as, you know, a friend or a stranger. This is what allows this show to keep you invested and entertained, even when from a plot standpoint, things aren't necessarily progressing as quickly as they would in any other kind of show. Right, so characters. Let's talk about some of the characters. First up, we got to talk about our main character, which is Natsuki Subaru. He's a selfish shut-in. He's a coward. He believes that his transportation to this other world is his shot at becoming the atypical isekai hero, where he's gonna slay the demon lord and get the girl and become the hero of the world. Unfortunately for him, he quickly realizes and has to come to terms with his own powerlessness in this world. Little by little, through all of his various return by deaths, he learns to pay attention to, you know, the people around him, to read a situation, to care, or at least acknowledge what the people around him want or need, which is not something he does when he originally shows up. He kind of puts on this fake facade that is eventually seen through, or he has to abandon it to save his own life. and he has to attempt to make actual human connections to these other characters if he wants to survive the death loop that he's currently in. So an example, so in the first loop, he's so absorbed in Subaru is so absorbed in himself that he fails to see like the small kind of hints and nods around him about this kingdom that he's been transported in. It's got a pretty drastic class system that's not really working for the people at the bottom. There's a major segregation between humans and demi-humans, which comes with, you know, racism and the likes. His interactions with Amelia constantly and continually allude to the racism that she's had to deal with because she's a half-elf, on top of looking like this evil witch, Satella. And, you know, if you're paying attention to the show, you, the viewer, pick up on these things. You can easily, like, see these things are happening. But you can also see that Subaru is not noticing. He's too involved with himself, and he's too self-absorbed to notice these things that are going around. And he's only able to notice it when it's basically forced upon him and shoved in his face. At the end of the first day, and throughout the end of the first day and all of the first loop, he has to return to the slums. The stuff goes down in the slums, and that's where the climax of the first loop is. That's where they keep getting killed. So he only notices this drastic difference when he's actually forced to go to the slums and look at it in the face. Only after his constant loops, when he realizes these things, is he able to assess like the situation he's actually found himself in and be able to survive the first loop. And these are flaws in his character, but that don't think I'm trying to, you know, say these are bad things. The flaws in Subaru's character and all of the characters of the show are a good thing, I feel, from a writing standpoint. That's what makes these characters realistic. They have good points to them too. All the characters have good points that make them likable characters that you want to root for. But their individual flaws are what I think make them feel more grounded and like actual living people in, you know, that would exist in this world. So when Subaru does finally start making notice of the needs of those around him and isn't so selfish and self-absorbed, that's when he's able to survive his first death loop, by learning and growing and changing from the kind of like, you know, the child with dreams of being the fantasy hero to an actual adult who has to live in society. You know, realizing that that this world existed long before he came here. It's going to exist after him. It's not some video game that's tailored for his enjoyment, but an actual living, breathing world with tons of people in it, politics that are pretty in-depth and at odds with one another. You know, when Subaru comes to this fantasy world, he's dropped into this kingdom called Lagunica, I think it's called, that is in the midst of political chaos. The ruling family has all but disappeared, either killed or I'm not sure, but they're gone, and now the kingdom itself is trying to select a new ruler, and there's 5 candidates, one of which is Amelia. So there's a lot going on in this world, and Subaru is not the sun that everything is going to, you know, circle around. He's not the center of everything. And when he realizes that, that's his first kind of moment of kind of growing as a character and being able to get out of his first death loop. But real quick, another sidetrack. I know I keep doing it since I brought up ReZero's world. It's one of the most detailed and in-depth fantasy worlds that I've ever seen in an anime. Obviously there are others on par, some that are even better than it, but there's a lot going on in ReZero's world. There's 3 different systems of magic, which are all fleshed out and interconnect with one another and do all kinds of different things. There's a complicated political system, like I said, that's in the throes of chaos, trying to find a new ruler. There's an incredibly long and rich history that goes into the origins of these witches, of the various beasts of the world, and all kinds of stuff. So just kind of as an aside, if you're a big kind of lore person, like a fantasy lore person on how these worlds are come to be and the history of these worlds that, you know, it put all the pieces in place to create our story. ReZero's got tons of that. Obviously, the light novels have a lot more of that than the anime does, but there's even a kind of like side anime where everyone's in like little cute like chibi, you know, forms, and that was airing. They're little shorts. They're maybe like 5 to 7 minute shorts, but they aired at the same time that ReZero aired, and they kind of had, I would say, like additional canonical conversations between these characters that the anime cut out that explain a lot of the world, and you get to see a little more of the characters, and but that's really good too, and I would recommend, you know, supplementing your watch with this with that, but it is not necessary. Anyway, so Subaru, many character flaws, and his character flaws can make some arcs in the show a little hard to watch. Like, yeah, by the end of the first loop, he learns to not be so selfish, but, you know, Subaru is constantly getting killed and dying, and that's not, I assume, is not a very pleasant experience. And that does come into play. There's a lot of times in other isekai where this regular person from our world who's never had to really deal with anything as traumatic as fighting for your life in some kind of fantasy world gets transported to this fantasy world and is just totally a-okay with, like, you know, stabbing another human being and possibly, you know, killing them, which is you know, I've never done anything like that, but I'm sure it can't be an easy thing to just be like, okay, I can do it now. Like, in a lot of other isekai, there's no real, like, I guess, recognition to the point that this person is definitely out of their element. They kind of just get transported and they're like, it's just like a video game. I'm great at them. I can do it. And then they do it. That's not the case in ReZero. Subaru gets killed, and it takes a drastic toll on his mental well-being, and it happens over and over, and it kind of drives him a little crazy, but he's got to deal with that as well. That's a great moment in the show, so I won't talk too much more on that and spoil it, but just know it definitely doesn't brush off to the side that, like, there's no effects on this person who continues to keep dying, and his friends forget about him, and it definitely comes into play, and I think it does a good job of that. And a lot of the other characters grow and change, and kind of learn from their mistakes, but at the same time, Subaru also develops other flaws because of the events. So they're not always changing for the better. Subaru learns to be more considerate of people around him and realize that he's not the center of attention in the first loop, but as the story progresses, he develops, like, a lot of anger issues. He develops a pretty strong and unhealthy possessiveness of our female heroine, Amelia, because in his world, he's been with Amelia for much longer than he has in Amelia's, you know, recollection of time, because Subaru's gone through multiple different loops. They've been together for a while. Subaru's went through a lot of traumatic things to try and protect her and try and help her, and she's done a lot of things in those time loops that have protected him and helped him. In his mind, they've got a much closer relationship than they do in her mind, because in her concept of the time they've been together, it's only been the roots, it's only been the loops that have been successful. Whereas Subaru's had to do each loop like maybe 5 times. He's spent a lot more time with her, and because he's gone through so much and sacrificed so much, and he ends up developing this very unhealthy possessiveness over her, and it definitely does not work out for him, particularly in the royal selection arc, which is by far, like, the worst part to watch, but in a good way. Like, it's like when when you're watching someone make poor choices that, like, mess themselves up, or watching someone obviously dig themselves into this hole, and there's really nothing you can do to help them. That's what I mean when I say it's hard to watch. And it all kind of, like, culminates into this scene in bed, which it's just a kind of incredibly cringy and heart-wrenching at the same time. All right, so I can already tell, like, with the amount of time that I would need to spend talking on the characters, it could be each character could basically have their own, like, 30 minute to 60-minute video. So I'm going to try and speed things up here, but I do want to spend a little time on our next character, who is our main heroine, which is Emilia, the silver-haired half-elf, who is one of the 5 candidates to become the ruler of this nation of Lagunica that they're all in. So Emilia is essentially, she's the epitome of the pure-hearted heroism, but her naivety, coupled by the fact that she's not only a demi-human, which a lot of people are racist against, but also bears resemblance to the terribly feared Witch of Envy, Satella. It's got her struggling to accomplish many of her own goals. Despite that, she still wants to do good. Her main goal in becoming the ruler of this nation is to make it a place where everyone, demi-human or otherwise, they're treated equally, everything's on fair playing ground. And although that is a admirable goal, she doesn't actually know the finer details of how to go about making such a thing possible. She's still on step 1, which is just become the ruler so she can. While we're on the topic, just really quick, again, I know I keep getting sidetracked here, but there's so many characters in the show, so many of them have important roles to play, and even if some are just brief kind of supporting characters, when they're off screen, you still feel like they're real enough, in a writing sense, that when they're off screen, they have these goals that they're moving to accomplish. They don't just go off screen and they're forgotten about. You're like, no, that person left and they're out there doing stuff, and they may come back later, they may not. But kind of speaking on that, there's 4 other royal candidates that are in the running to become ruler of the nation, and they're all very important. So there's Krush, who wants to kind of create a strong military and have the people of the nation stand on their own 2 feet, and they're no longer like under the jurisdiction of this dragon who's been apparently protecting the kingdom. We haven't really seen that yet. There's Priscilla, who has basically had everything handed to her. She wants to rule as like a monarchy. She believes that like fate itself can like bend to her whim. Everything works out well for her. Nothing's ever gone bad for her. So if she's in charge of this nation, nothing bad's ever going to happen to the nation. Anastasia is someone who's worked her way up from poverty. She's kind of become this capitalist elite, and she would have the country add it to her list of many things, and that's going to be good for the country because she takes care of her things. She would run the place like a business. Everyone would prosper. And finally, Felt is an orphan of the slums who's had the worst end of the stick in as far as life goes. She's lived in the slums, and she's seen exactly what this ruling class system is doing and how it's just not working. So she wants to, she's a little anarchist. She wants to take everything down, from the nobility to the military. Just tear it all down. And like I said, each of these characters could warrant their own videos speaking on them, and would consist of quite a lot of spoilers. So believe me when I say that these characters are way more than just the quick little like sentence or 2 that I just gave them. There's a lot more going on to them. They've got their own backstories that it makes total sense why they believe that their way is the right way to rule things. And let me say too that there's no like really good and evil in that aspect of the show. There's no good side and bad side. Obviously you've got certain characters that you want to root for. Everyone in the running they're all competitors, they're all rivals, but they all honestly believe that their way of doing things is the right way to do it and will help a lot of people. All right, so let's continue with characters, and I'm gonna try and rapid fire this out there just to introduce the characters to you. So there's Rahm and Rem, who are twin Oni sisters that Subaru encounters while he's working at the mansion during the mansion arc. They have a history involving the witches cult, and due to those circumstances have come to work in this mansion. Rem feels guilty about the events of the witches cult from their past, and tries to do everything to fill in for her sister Ram, who she has a major inferiority complex with. Ram, on the other hand, is really confident, but at the same time, because of those same events in her past, knows that she's no longer someone who is strong enough to protect those around her, and as such kind of tries to not be a burden. But she's also the big sister, and she's not going to she's not going to lose that title. She needs to keep up that appearance. The dynamic between the two sisters is great to watch. I always love when they're both on screen, and it's often incredibly funny, which is a nice change of pace from the more kind of psychological horror-y vibe that the other portion of the show kind of leans to. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a psychological horror, but Subaru goes through some stuff. He's got to deal with a lot of stuff, and things can get pretty weird. So it's a nice change. You'll have like the comedic moments, and then things will get real serious. So Roswaal is the master of the mansion, and he can be both a serious and a funny character. But as you're watching him, you can definitely feel that he's up to something nefarious, or he's a puppet master in some way. He's pulling strings. You aren't necessarily sure what strings he's pulling or what for, but he's definitely up to something. All right, so to talk about the rest of this, I'm gonna leave the characters there. There's a bunch of different characters. There's an order of knights that are like the military in this world, and there's a bunch of characters from that come into play and are doing a bunch of stuff. There's a former sword saint, which essentially is like the greatest swordsman in the whole country. She comes into the mix, but then is gone, and so now it's her husband who is the current sword saint. And he's super cool. The cast of characters is incredibly large, and they're all interconnected. There's none of the characters just stand alone on their own. They have some relationship or are doing something with one of the other characters or many of the other characters. And that really kind of helps bring out the inner workings of this fantasy world that Subaru is sent to. And it makes it a believable place that doesn't revolve around our main character. This world definitely existed long before this story started, and is going to exist way after the story ends. There's so many things going on. It's a real living, breathing world. But let's talk about the art and the character designs. But I think they're both really well done. Every character is very unique and expressive. And the monster designs, the monster designs in ReZero are something else. They're pretty crazy. Hopefully I'll have found some good pictures. I'll put them up as I'm talking about this. The monster designs in ReZero they're something else. The biggest downside I'd say with the art is the background CGI characters. Anyone who watches my other show, the Otabros show, knows how strong my distaste for CGI is in anime, and it still stands even in this show. I've basically done nothing but sing praises about ReZero so far, so I definitely want to touch on some of the things I don't like about it. And at the tippy top of that list is the CGI background characters. In its defense, we have amazing animation in other places of the show, and the CGI townspeople they're not important. So I understand why, you got to cut corners somewhere so you can put effort in other places. It was their best place to do it. It was the CGI townspeople, but I'm not going to give them a freebie for that. They're not all copy and paste, character models, the background CGI townspeople. They're all different, and they're all doing things in the background. They're buying fruits, they're buying vegetables, they're shopping, they're trying to hail carts and drive carts, and it really makes the world, like, especially when they're in like the major city, the kingdom, the capital city in this kingdom. There's a lot of people moving and moving and grooving. It makes it feel like a bustling, populated city. But I still don't like CGI. All right, so the animation is really good as well. There's incredibly entertaining action scenes, and even in the more intimate scenes between characters just speaking to one another, everything's kind of in motion, and it's very fluid and captivating. Obviously you can see it best in the action scenes, which have great choreography. They've got really good use of like the surrounding environment. It's not just character A and character B and they're bashing swords together and and that's really it. They make use of the environment and magic and all kinds of stuff. And the action scenes too aren't just great looking random fights either. I mean, they are great looking fights, but there's a lot of narrative buildup that comes with like the big payoff when the fight actually happens. An example is the white whale fight. I won't go into too much detail in the white whale fight or what necessarily it may be. The white whale fight has like maybe 5 or more episodes of hype, like building up to this confrontation with this white whale. And when it finally does happen, it's definitely worth it. It's a super cool fight. Finally, the icing on the cake that kind of blends all these different things together. Each of the different aspects of the show are incredibly well done and stand on their own. But the thing that kind of ties everything together and gives everything that little bit more oomph is the music. And obviously it's an anime. There's I think 2 different for season 1. There's 2 different OPs and EDs, and they're all fantastic in my opinion. But I don't want to focus on the OPs and EDs as amazing as I think that they are. I don't think they're directly involved in the story of the show. But I do want to say I did always watch the OPs and EDs. I've rewatched the show a couple of times, and even during rewatches, I always play the whole OP and the whole ED before I start the next episode. Which, speaking of, another quick aside, I know I keep getting distracted here, but anyone who's about to watch this for the first time, I just want you to know how lucky you are, not because you're about to watch a very good show, but also because there are tons of gut-wrenching cliffhangers that you are not going to have to wait an entire week to get closure from. I watched this show as it was airing week to week, and it was almost torturous. And once you start watching, you'll see that what some of these episodes leave off on, and realizing that I was gonna have to wait a week to get any kind of closure to that was horrible, but also a lot of fun. So anyway, the actual music of the show does a very good job. Whether it's the high octane action scenes, a melancholy scene at sunset, the music just keeps it helps put everything it helps put you in the exact state of mind that you're supposed to be in. Suehiro Kenichiro really knocked it out of the park, and he's done tons of music on all kinds of stuff. The greatest bit of music in the show that always just nails it with delivering the desired effect to you, the viewer, is the song called Call of the Witch. Every time this song is used in the show, that eerie feeling just comes over you. Hairs start to stand up on the back of your neck, and after the first like 1 or 2 times you hear the song, it's unnerving, and then every other time that song comes on, nothing good is about to happen. But yeah, so there it is. That's who knows how long it is. A decently long video of me trying to convince you to watch ReZero. We've talked about it on my other show, the Otabros show. I can't plug it enough. We talked about it there for multiple different episodes. Sometimes as long as 2 hours. So there's still a lot that needs to be said, but again, I also didn't want to give too many spoilers as to what happens. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check out ReZero, and I urge anyone who may not have been interested at first glance, or maybe only gave like episode 1 a shot, give it another shot and really sit down and watch it and give it an honest shot. I think you'll be able to see why so many people like it. They did a director's cut recently that added some more scenes and stuff, and they released that as they were, because it's been like 4 years since season 1, and season 2 is, like I said, currently airing now. So during the lead up to season 2, they released the director's cut with additional scenes and stuff like that. So I definitely recommend the director's cut, especially as you're going into season 2. But yes, season 2 is currently airing, and it's been so fantastic so far. They go into Subaru's life before he's been transported into into this fantasy world, which isn't a thing many isekai do. We get to see his parents, we get to see why he is how he is. And you know, those of you who are enlightened like I am and have watched the show and enjoyed it, I also recommend the light novels, which may or may not be at your local library. The light novels have a lot more information about the massive world that they're in, the lore surrounding it, the magic systems, all that kind of stuff. So I would definitely recommend them as well. There's the anime does a very good job of adapting the light novels, but like any anime or movie or whatever, you know, things are left out from the source material because of time restraints. So if you're really enjoying the show, I would recommend going to a light novel. You're not getting the really cool animated fight scenes, but you get a lot more like character interaction and stuff like that, kind of opening the doors to a lot more of the mechanics going on behind the curtains there. I guess finally, if you're still here, I just want to say thanks for sticking around and listening to me talk about one of my favorite anime shows of like the past couple years. I know I started jumping all over the place, but hopefully I managed to convince some of you guys to check out ReZero if you haven't already. Again, I was Kevin from the Otabros. Just want to thank my local library for asking me to do this. It's, you know, fantastic. I love talking about anime and that kind of stuff, and can't wait for our in-person kind of club meetings to get back going once COVID's finally over. Who knows when that'll be. But yeah, thanks again.